We have seen the month of October as very active. The deadline for annual returns, there was a release of the draft notification and the amendment, eighth amendment that was released on 30th of October. Today, we are going to discuss on the notifications that were released by MoEFCC. First notification, the draft notification that was released on 16th of October 2023, which is still under public review. The timeline that is given for 60 days should be completed by 15th of December 2023. And the Eighth Amendment that was released on 30th of October 2023. Namaste, everyone, and a very happy Dhanteras to each and every one of you. I'm delighted to welcome you all today as we welcome our festive season that radiates light, joy, and spirit of togetherness. In advance, let me wish you on behalf of A to G family a very happy and prosperous Diwali. Today, as we start the webinar, our speaker, Mr. Abhishek Garg, will be speaking on the two notifications that were released by MoEFCC. So over to you, Mr. Abhishek.
Thank you, Ipshita. And hi, welcome everyone, and happy Dhanteras and a happy Diwali in advance. And I think there is a lot to be discussed, and without any further ado, let me just delve into the topic of today's webinar discussion, which is the draft notification of October and the 8th amendment of 30th October, which was published. So before delving into the same, this evolutionary slide which depicts how the evolution of PWM has happened in last 7 years, which now still keeps on moving ahead, and more new key milestones of amendment are getting added. Now in 2023, as we know, in April there was a slight amendment, and now again in October there are a couple of amendments. So moving on, and now getting into the what are the key things and happened under these two amendments. So first, to clarify and how the presentation will move forward, let me align on those factors. The whole presentation is been divided into separate color theme and coding, which depicts the amendment which has happened in the past. But the key thing which you need to specify and focus on to is the red color and the little peacock green color. The red color which you see over here is the draft notification, which was published on 16th October. And as rightly mentioned by Ipshita, the MoFCC has asked for the objections, comments on the proposed regulation, and they have given a timeline of 60 days. So we need to submit our responses, suggestions before 15th December, and all of your queries and clarification are all welcome onto that. And on 30th of October, there was a final amendment released on the PWM rules and having key specific things. So what are the key things under the draft regulation which was published on 16th of October? So there has been some major changes and milestone landmark changes which has been proposed by MoEFCC. Now there has been key changes in the obligated entities, wherein two new obligated entities has been proposed to be added under the rule, which is manufacturer and importer of plastic raw material. Second is manufacturer of compostable and biodegradable plastic packaging for allowed for the permitted use of plastic packaging and commodities. Seller is also introduced, but without obligation. It's a value chain introduction, but it's not included and defined under the obligation. However, further, the importer definitions has been also been proposed to be amended, wherein only importer who is importing for the purpose of sale are to be covered under the regulation, not for self consumption. And a landmark change here is that the MoFCC has proposed that micro and small producer shall not have the EPR obligation. However, they still need to follow and observe the compliances of registration and reporting the transactions. So these are the major impact which has happened and proposed by MoFCC to be amended and to include into the regulations. Further, there has been some major changes in the obligated categories. One landmark thing is that new category 5 has been added in as a biodegradable packaging, but there is no target specified for category 5. Further, in category 4 and category 2 and 3, there has been slight changes in the definitions, and there is a clarification provided wherein what is the coverage of EPR under this category 2, 3, and 4. Responsibilities of local bodies and gram panchayat has been redefined. There has been a lot of authorities and SPCB regulations also been defined under that. Prescribed authority has been also been provided and changed, and also that CPCB will also be coming out with a process for deciding the min and max price of the EPR certificates. So we will be discussing all these in the upcoming slides. Further, the green one which you see on the right side of this particular slide, which says what are the key amendment which has happened under on the 30th of October. First clarification issued under the regulation is that exports are exempted from the EPR obligation, but it includes the pre-consumer waste generated for producing the final product which is exported. Further, the definition of carry bag and producer has been changed. Producer definition in the PWM rule and not the Schedule 2. So we are specifying the amendment has happened in under the mother definition of producer under the PWM rules, not the Schedule 2. And also carry bags definition has been amended to include biodegradable plastic bags. In the same amendment of 30th October, you would have received that the date for filing of annual return has been extended to 30th November 2023. And also MoEFCC has permitted and allowed CPCB to extend it further, has permitted and granted the authority which allows them to extend the filing timeline up to a max of 9 months. So for example, if 30th June is the official deadline and timeline, CPCB can extend maximum 9 months up to 30th of March of the next year. So that is also been provided under the amendment of the rules. Responsibility for prescribed authority regulation has been completely redefined. Further, a major impact to the PIBOs is wherein the marking and labeling regulation has been completely revamped, and they have removed a lot of bottlenecks, and they have made it very clear what is the marking and labeling required in which kind of plastic packaging. Now the word one-time registration has been introduced as there was so many confusion whether the renewal is required or not required in the regulation. So to clarify all those, they have made it simple that registration is a one-time registration and there is no renewal as required, but the compliances as required needs to be followed. The state level monetary committee has been provided in the regulation that state level monitoring committee needs to be set, and 6 month biannually there should be a meeting of that committee, and those has been prescribed under the regulations. One interesting thing which CPCB MoFCC understood, wherein CPCB may allow setting of the EPR target of a category wherein there is no ample amount of EPR credit available to set it off with via another category certificate. So for example, if you have an obligation under category 4 for 100 tons and the credit is not available for category 4, and if there is a surplus available in category 2 or 3, then this exchange and the fulfillment through category 2 certificates can be done, but CPCB will have to allow for doing that. So these are the just key highlights of the regulation. And what we have done is that we have combined these two regulations to reflect to you what is the holistic picture of PWM rules now looks like. Now moving on. Now this is the one pager brief summary of the entire PWM rules, and it includes the key important things which covers and impacts the obligated entities. So who are the obligated entities? As I said previously it was four. Now there are six obligated entities has been identified via the proposed regulation. And now the first one, the producer of plastic packaging, the definition has changed and it is a final definition because it's the color. You can specify the, it's check the color and accordingly, understand. But there is a definition change in producer of plastic packaging. There is a proposed definition amendment in importer. There is no change in 3 and 4. The 5 and 6 is the proposed new addition in the obligated entity. Another thing I'm proposed to be amended is the micro and small producers are exempted of the obligation, but they need to register and follow the compliances. And who are micro and small producers? The turnover of companies whose which is less than 50 crores, and as applicable under MSME Act. Further, seller as a mechanism has also introduced, and we will discuss what is the definition of the seller has been provided. For the manufacturer and importer of plastic raw materials, their obligation of EPR target is limited to the product or of raw materials sold to micro and small producers. So as micro and small producer doesn't have the obligation, somebody needs to pick up that obligation, and that will be manufacturer and importer of plastic raw materials. Yeah, I agree. There would be question how this will happen and how this obligation transfer will happen. Yes, those are the question when we need to ask this question and to the MoEFCC, as this is a proposed amendment. Further, under the conditions under the regulation, it is clearly specified the manufacturer of plastic raw materials are not permitted to sell the raw materials to unregistered producers and sellers. And there are other key requirement of compliances which manufacturer need to observe, which we will take you through in the upcoming slides. Now, the types of plastic packaging which are obligated under the regulations. We all know category 1 rigid plastic packaging where there is no change. In category 2, there is a definition change proposed under the 16th October proposed amendment. In category 3, there is a slight amendment. In category 4, there is a change which talks about the coverage of EPR, and category 5, which is biodegradable plastic, which includes commodities. To further tell you, the category 4 and 5 now also includes under EPR obligation the plastic commodities made out of compostable and biodegradable. Right. So previously, whenever I used to showcase this slide, I used to say that only plastic packaging is applicable. But now plastic specified plastic or permitted plastic commodities made up of compostable and biodegradable are also obligated. For biodegradable, there is no target has been specified for the PIBO. Only manufacturers are need to take the obligation for biodegradable, but that needs more clarity, and that so I'm expecting a lot of question there. But yes, that needs a more clarity and not specified very clearly under the regulation. Further, the EPR targets, the methodology to calculate the EPR targets, the environmental compensation, and all those things are unchanged. Hence, not going to put so much time there. But in the regulatory implementation, there are additional things which has been mentioned. For example, as I said, online registration is applicable to all, but obligation is not there for seller and micro and small producers. The obligated entity shall not deal with any unregistered entities under the rule. Again, they have specified this very clearly. As I said, export is exempted, but the pre-consumer waste generated for the export product is still obligated. Thickness rules, thickness obligation is exempted for compostable and biodegradable. In the marking labeling, which has been redefined, it now includes marking labeling on the rigid plastic packaging. So in the April 2023, there was an amendment which happened, which exempted the rigid plastic packaging for marking labeling, but with this 30th October regulation amendment, now it includes the rigid packaging as well. Further, the pre-consumer waste generated from the manufacturing of plastic commodities are now required to be reported, disclosed under the consent to operate licenses. So, for example, a company who is producing toy and there is a plastic, pre-consumer waste generated during this process, they need to disclose this quantum, and they need to ensure that they provide this plastic product waste or pre-consumer product waste to the authorized recycler as well. And yes, there is a concurrent and annual reporting which is still there. Moving on. Now, this is the slide for the obligated entities and what are their obligation and what are their definition. Previously, under the producer definition in the PWM rule 3, the producer definition was a elongated one which had created a lot of confusion who are obligated as a producer or no. However, with the new definition, which is very simple one-liner, which means producer means person engaged in manufacture of plastic packaging. Very clear. Registration is applicable for everyone, including micro and small, but the obligation is only excluded for the micro and small producer. The obligation is exempted. The registration compliances and the online compliance still there. Second, for the importer, they have proposed to amend the definition of importer, and they have introduced a very interesting thing wherein they say the importer it means a person who imports for the purpose of further sale. So if you are importing, let's say, a machinery or a raw material, which you are, using it in for production of your product, then you are not required, or you are not obligated as an importer. But if you are importing a product to further sale into the market, then you are obligated as an importer under the definition. For manufacturer and importer of plastic raw material, the definition is not elongated specified for this particular category, but it is a culmination of other definition of manufacturer. But it is simple. The manufacturer and importer of plastic raw materials, which is resins, pellets, chips, granules, all those. Manufacturer of compostable and biodegradable commodities. What is the definition of this obligated entity? The manufacturers of items mentioned in sub rule 4HA, which we will be taking you through. What are those items which are permitted to be made from compostable and biodegradable plastics? So the manufacturers are those who are producing such mentioned items made up of compostable and biodegradable. And manufacturer is obligated for biodegradable, and that I will take you through in the upcoming slides. There is no change in the brand owner definitions. There is no change into the plastic waste processor definitions, and and their registration requirement and obligation. For seller, the definition of seller mentioned is means a person who sells plastic raw material or intermediate material for plastic packaging for further use or sale. So what they are trying to project here is that from the plastic manufacturer to the producer, there could be certain intermediated seller or trader who needs to register and disclose this transaction. However, they do not have the EPR obligations. So yes, they had a mandatory one-time registration requirement to be fulfilled. One very interesting and important thing which CPCB also MoEFCC is proposing here is that in case there is a delay of approval from SPCB or PCC for more than 10 days for a complete registration, and if SPCB is not approving that complete registration on the portal, then that particular registration will move to CPCB, and CPCB will be the authority to approve the same. So this particular clause has been inserted to expedite the process of registration if it is not getting properly picked up from the SPCBs. Further, this is just to show what are the definitions, but I would want to draw your attention in the multi-layer definition. Now you can see, and it is proposed to be amended. The all the details which a multi-layer packaging definition which you see here, which is the mother definition and the PWM rule, there's a very slight change which you will find here. The earlier the metallization was included in the definition, wherein it was inserted polymeric material metallization or aluminum foil. However, that has been removed. The only change happened in this definition is that metallization word has been removed from the mother definition of MLP. So yes, this is the major change which has happened here. And now, what are the categories and what are their definition of those categories which needs to be understood very clearly? Now, they have also defined the plastic packaging, and this is particularly mentioned under the PWM rules, and the EPR cover. The definition is mentioned under the mother rule, PWM rule, and the EPR coverage for these categories is mentioned under the Schedule 2. So category 1, there is no change. For category 2, there's a slight change which extends the definition of category 2, which includes metallized layers. So prior to this, there was a lot of ambiguity in terms of plastic packaging companies are using, which has the metallization layers and not a separate aluminum foil. So whether to include those plastic packaging category 2 or category 3, there was a confusion. But with this amendment, has now been clarified and proposed to be clarified that the plastic packaging with the metallization layers needs to be included into the category 2. For category 3, the definition is as is. For the category 3, for category 4, the definition is same, which is plastic packaging made of compostable plastics. However, the coverage has been extended, wherein the permitted commodities and items are carry bags, sachets used for storing, packing, or selling gutka, tobacco, and pan masala, and commodities under banned under sub rule 2B of the rule 4 of these rules. In summary, prior to this amendment, proposed amendment, the plastic was not allowed to be used for sachets or packaging or for storing, packing, or selling gutka, tobacco, and pan masala. However, with this, now this compostable and biodegradable plastics can be used for storing, packing, of selling gutka, tobacco, and pan masala. And also, this compostable and biodegradable plastic can be used for the items banned under the specified list of single-use plastics, which is Rule 2B, which I will be taking through in the upcoming slides. The similar regulation, the similar definitions for category 5 and the EPR coverage has been mentioned for category 5. For pre-consumer and the post-consumer, the definition remains the same. There is no such change. Now, use of compostable and biodegradable plastic for permitted items. So let's look into little bit of definition for clarity. So in the rule 41HA, it clearly says the use of compostable and plastics and biodegradable plastics is permitted only for manufacture of carry bags, sachets used for storing, packing, or selling gutka, tobacco, and pan masala, which was banned for all plastic. But now this is a major change for this industry and sector, wherein they can now use biodegradable and compostable plastic for storing, for sachet used for storing, packing, selling gutka, tobacco, and pan masala. And the commodities banned under sub rule 2B of the rule 4 of these rules, which are these, which is plates, cups, glasses, cutleries, wrapping or packing film in around invitation cards and sweet boxes, and cigarette packets, and plastic or PVC banner less than 100 micron or stirrers. So compostable plastics is now compostable and biodegradable is now allowed for these items, as well as two banned items under rule 2B, 4.2b. Also, all of these which are to be used or made from biodegradable and compostable need to have be a mandatory marking and labeling as prescribed under the marking labeling regulations. Further, CPCB and MoEFCC has extended and provided this authority to CPCB, which says that CPCB may, as required, prescribe guidelines to permit manufacture of further commodities from compostable and biodegradable plastics after the approval of the government. So CPCB in future can add more items which can be called as permitted items to be made from biodegradable and compostable plastics. Further, the what are the things they need to do, start reporting for manufacture of biodegradable and compostable plastics, is that they need to start reporting these item of what is the quantum they have introduced into the market from 1st April 2024, and they also need to report what is the pre-consumer waste generated. One of the some of the key important things which we need to understand, which comes from the schedule 2 amendment, proposed amendments, that manufacturer of a biodegradable plastic is to take the responsibility of fulfillment of EPR obligation through purchasing EPR certificates generated by local authorities. In the whole rule schedule 2 and the PWM rules, there is no percentage or category 5 target percentage is specified for PIBO. The only obligation for fulfillment of EPR stated under the rule is only for the manufacture of biodegradable plastics and not for the PIBO. The responsibility for collection and biodegradation of biodegradable plastic is with the local authorities, and it should be in accordance with the specified BIS. And manufacturer to record and report the information of transaction with the local body on the centralized portal, which CPCB will be coming out with the mechanism. So this is a small summary of what are the permitted items for which wherein the biodegradable and compostable plastics can be used, what are their obligation for the manufacturers, and who has what kind of obligation and targets. Moving on, I think this will be covered in the upcoming slides. Moving on, a very important discussion, which is now the new obligated entity, which is manufacturer and importer of plastic raw materials. So, what are the obligation and compliances for manufacturer of plastic raw materials? First and foremost, that what is the definition? Manufacturer means and include a person or unit or agency engaged in the production of plastic raw material, right? A very important condition is not to sell or provide arranged plastic to be used as a raw material to a unregistered producer or a seller. So the manufacturer are not allowed to sell the plastic raw material to unregistered party. Very plain and simple. The manufacturer need to do the one-time registration with the relevant SPCB and PCC through the Form 3 and on through the online portal. The obligation for manufacturer of plastic raw material is limited to the plastic raw material sold to micro and small producer, as already said. There is a quarterly reporting mechanism and a format specified, and the sale invoices also need to be provided in that reporting. Producer, while the obligation for the micro and small producer of the EPR lies with manufacturer, however, the micro and small producer still needs to fulfill the target of use of the recycled plastic content, which is very logical as they are the people who use and create the final plastic packaging. The minimum level of recycling of plastic packaging waste is also defined for the manufacture of plastic raw materials. Further, as I said, these are the conditions specified for the manufacturers under the regulations, wherein they are asked that they are not allowed to sell to unregistered parties, and they are also not allowed to sell to parties involved in manufacturing of banned SUPs, parties who are producing plastic packaging which is not compliant with the thickness norms, and many more. Further, they have also given a clause under the regulation which the manufacturers need to incorporate in the sale contracts, MOUs, or the sale price list with their customers. In the bags or plastic packaging which the manufacturer are using to sell their products, they need to ensure that they print this in their bags, which says not to be used in the manufacture of SUP items prohibited under PWM rules, plastic sheets and less than 50 micron thickness, non-woven carry bags less than 60 GSM, or carry bags less than 120 microns. As well as the manufacturers need to mention the EPR registration number of the producer on the sale invoice to ensure that they are selling to only registered producers. Further, the concerned SPCB or PCC to ensure filing of annual reports of pre-consumer plastic waste generated through the portal as a part of consent compliance mechanism. Moving on, there is a registration format also provided under the regulation wherein it is similar and there is no much change. However, for the manufacturer's registration, however, the quarterly reporting format has been issued, and this is how it looks like, wherein they are asking the manufacturers to report quarterly, and they need to report in this format, wherein they have to say what is the buyer name, what is the buyer category, and they have specified the categories to be used, the registration number of the buyer, type of raw material supplied, which is the polymer type, quantity, the buyer GSTN, and the GSTN e-invoice number. So all these details are required to be submitted by the manufacturer in this format. There's a slight amendment under the responsibility of PIBO regulation in the clause, wherein they have amended the regulation to include the manufacturer under the obligation as well. And they have suggested that in order to develop a separate waste stream and mixing of plastic with other dry waste, the PIBO need to, PIBO may operate schemes such as plastic deposit refund scheme or buyback or any other model to prevent mixing of plastic packaging waste with solid waste. So this is slight amendment under the responsibility section of PIBO under the PWM rule. Now, moving on, which is a very important section, which is the marking and labeling, what has changed there and what has been clarified. So, with the new clause of marking labeling, it has become very clear in terms of what category of plastic packaging, what are the marking labeling required. So, if you see this particular one slide, which talks about what is the marking labeling requirement for category 1 rigid plastic packaging. Category 2 has been further split into two categories. One is category 2 flexible mono and single layer plastic, and category 2 flexible multi-layer, which has a multiple layer of plastic, including the plastic packaging which is made through metallization. Category 3 is multi-layer with plastic with non-plastic. Category 4 is compostable, and category 5 is biodegradable. In this, they have also what are the now what are the requirement of marking labeling for all this plastic packaging. First and the foremost is name and EPR registration number to be printed for all of these plastic packaging. There is no deviation there. Second, the thickness requirement to be printed. This is required to be printed for flexible majorly, and that to mono and single layer. For category 4 and 5, there is a specific additional CPCB registration number required to be printed on the plastic packaging. For the similar category, category 4 and 5, there are separate color code which will be prescribed by BIS, which needs to be printed on these plastic packaging of category 4 and 5. Further, there are additional mentions required to be done, which talks about the recycled logo, which is applicable for recycled carry bags and plastic packaging, and this polymer logo needs to be specified on the plastic packaging, and that is for recycled carry bag and recycled plastic packaging. For compostable, there is an additional mention which requires to be done, which says compostable only under industrial composting. For category 5, there is additional mention which says biodegradable in specify the number of days only in the specify the recipient environment such as landfill, water or land, or when it says land, it refers to the soil. So these are the additional mentions to be done for category 4 and 5. Further, what is the effective date mentioned under this clause? For rigid, the marking labeling to be effected from 1st July 2024. They for category 2 and 3, there is no specific date mentioned, so it is as applicable. For category 4, it is 1st Jan 2025, and for biodegradable, it is as applicable, no dates clearly specified. Further, provision of this rule shall not apply to plastic packaging covered under the Rule 26 of the Legal Metrology Packed Commodity Rules 2011. Also, prior to this, there was a mention under the marking labeling regulation wherein which says that you will require CPCB approval for claiming the exemption of marking labeling under Rule 26, which is not mentioned in the amended regulation, which says CPCB, which doesn't specify the requirement of CPCB approval. Further, and a very important one which clarifies a lot of queries which were there prior in terms of multi-pack, in terms of secondary packaging. So now they have clarified saying that provided that also that the relevant information in respect of plastic packaging shall also be printed on the plastic package on the packaging that holds together individual units of goods or the individual units of packing. So for example, let's assume there are four boxes of biscuit packs, which is further packed in a secondary packaging. So it is asking the now regulation is asking the secondary packaging also needs to have the necessary marking and labeling as applicable. Moving on, this is the list of the banned SUPs which you all would be aware of, but to specify and to clarify that the permitted items which we are talking about rule 2B is only for these items, which is plates, cups, which starting from 2B, right? Not the 2A. So if you say that can I make compostable plastic for earbud sticks? No. So that's not allowed. Only allowed for cutlery, packing, wrapping films and other items mentioned under 2B. Moving on, This is the annual reporting summary, which is specified for PIBOs. It is 30th June. However, for a specific this year, that has been extended. For PWP, it was 30th April, but it has been extended. But this is just one pager summary of the responsible people, obligated people, when do they need to do the reportings accordingly. And the last one, which talks about the generation of surplus EPR certificates and purchase of EPR certificate from different categories. Under the Rule 8, they have specified that CPCB will issue guidelines for authorization of agencies to establish electronic platform for trade of EPR certificates. The operation and regulation will be issued by CPCB, and it will be highly regulated through the CPCB regulations and guidelines. CPCB also will be fixing the highest and the lowest price for EPR certificates in every 6 months or as required. And this is draft which is proposed. However, in the 30th October guidelines, 30th October amendment, it is clearly mentioned that CPCB may allow purchase of EPR certificates where deficit exists from the surplus categories, provided there is an availability of credits in those categories in surplus. And this particular proviso will cease to apply from FY by the end of FY of 25-26. So this is just interim measure to ensure to facilitate the issue of not having sufficient credit in a particular category. Now, I think I'll hand it over to Ipshita, and yeah, looking forward to. I'll come again in the Q&A session to answer your queries. Thank you. Over to you, Ipshita.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for such a wonderful explanation and making the draft notification and the Eighth Amendment so easy for all of us to understand. I've been reading reviews in the chat box as well that were really appreciating all about the information that you have given here. So this particular slide, wherein we have seen recently that PWP notices have been released by the CPCB, and they have been written directly to the local SPCBs, asking them about various clarifications with respect to PWP registrations granted. Here, this is a very important slide. How we as PIBOs need to ensure that what all things that we need to take care in order to align with the PWPs, in order to give a particular job to the authenticated or the validated PWPs. So, what is the impact towards such kind of notices to our companies, and how we need to ensure this is a very important thing to understand, and what should be our next steps. Towards this, I want to announce that we will be conducting a closed webinar, a closed conference, wherein we will be taking up the steps. We will be understanding the impacts related to such notices, and what steps that we need to take care in order to align our work with the respective PWPs. This will be a closed conference. I'm repeating again. And yes, whoever are interested, the respective PIBOs can definitely, give their approval through a very short message in the chat box that yes, you are interested, and we will be sharing the invites to you directly. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending, for sparing your time today uh, in this webinar. And I wish you all a very happy Diwali.